Hello, welcome back to my kitchen. Today I woke up in the mood for homemade buttermilk biscuits. So we're gonna be making biscuits and gravy today. So the ingredients that you'll need 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour. Make sure it's not self-rising. We're gonna be adding some baking powder to this. So you just need standard all-purpose flour, 2.5 cups. You'll also need 2 tablespoons of baking powder. You will also need, what did I do with it? Here it is. You're gonna need 1 teaspoon of salt and 1.5 teaspoons of sugar. So I just kind of have that mixed in there together. You're gonna need about 1.5 cups of buttermilk. This is whole fat buttermilk. I find that buttermilk biscuits taste better when you use a whole fat buttermilk. So be sure you get a whole fat buttermilk, not the reduced fat or low fat buttermilk. And be sure to use buttermilk and not standard milk. So that definitely helps with your recipe. You'll also need 1 full stick of unsalted butter. And again, be sure that your butter is unsalted. We'll be adding a little bit of salt to the biscuit, so no worries about that, but unsalted. And what I do with this is, before I start my recipe, is I take 1 stick and I cube the butter and I stick it in the freezer. This helps make your biscuits very light and fluffy when you have that cold butter that you're using. And then you'll also need about 1/2 cup of flour just on reserve to help with, you'll need to put this on your work surface as you're rolling out the biscuits. And then you'll also need a buttered baking pan to put your biscuits on. So the first thing that you'll want to do, you'll want to take your dry ingredients. So again, we have the 2 tablespoons of baking powder. We're going to add that in there with the flour. And then you're going to take your 1 teaspoon of salt, 1.5 teaspoons of sugar. You're going to put that in there and you're just going to give that a mix. Get all your dry ingredients blended in well. Next, you'll need to take your butter that you have cubed, and again, you want to make sure that this butter is really cold. As you work it, of course, it's going to warm up a little bit, but the colder you get it in advance before you put it in the flour, the better your biscuits will come out. So be sure that you have chilled butter you're going to put in there. We're going to put this, and again, this was 1 full stick. We're going to just put that in there. And my hands are clean. I washed my hands before we got started. With incorporating the butter into the flour, some people choose to use like a pastry cutter of some sort. I tend to use my hands whenever I'm cutting the butter, and it just helps me make sure I get everything in there. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna take either your pastry cutter and you're just gonna kind of mash down that butter into the flour. It'll start making it kind of like clumps and lumps of the butter flour mixture. You want to break that down to get it kind of fine. That's going to help make flaky biscuit. So now I'm just going to take my hands and I'm just going to kind of mash that butter in there, break it up. It's kind of hard to do, so hopefully you have some strong hands. This was the way that I was taught to make biscuits. You can also take like a fork and help incorporate it that way. However you choose, it's fine. Just be sure that if you are using your hands, of course, that your hands are clean. So we're just gonna kind of get this all broken up, and I just take the butter and I just kind of mash it between my fingers and incorporate that into the flour. So you wanna make sure you do this well. You don't wanna have any large chunks of butter in your flour mixture. So we're just gonna do this until we get a nice consistency. Okay, and as you see here, I have all of my butter incorporated. You might still have some tiny lumps in there. That is perfectly okay. So I just want to make sure that that is all incorporated there. And then the next step that I would do is I would make sure you have your workspace cleaned. You're going to take that flour that you put on reserve, that about 1/2 cup or so. You're going to sprinkle that down on your work surface. And you also want to get a little bit there on your rolling pin. All right, so then what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the buttermilk, we're gonna pour that in. Now typically it just depends on the flour, and make sure that you've measured your ingredients, your dry ingredients, the correct way. I use typically about 1.25 cups, sometimes 1.5 cups. It really just depends. You don't want your dough to get too wet, and you also don't want it to be too dry. So I usually pour about 1 cup of that in first, incorporate that, and then I'll add in a little bit more as needed. So here we're pouring in, like I said, about 1 cup of that buttermilk. I'm just gonna stir that. Now you don't wanna over stir, you just wanna get the buttermilk so that it's mixed in the flour, but you definitely don't want to over stir it because it will make your biscuits kind of tough. So as you see here, this needs a little bit more liquid because it's just not wet enough yet. So I'm gonna add in the remainder, half a cup. And every now and then, I might have to do like a cup and 3/4. So we'll just kind of see. We're gonna get that incorporated, make sure that all the dry ingredients are mixing with the buttermilk. All right, see how it's coming along? All right. So just kind of eyeballing this, I think that it does need a little bit more buttermilk. So I'm going to add just a couple more dashes until I think it's, you know, it doesn't look too dry. So just a little bit more there. Gonna get that mixed in. And I think this is probably perfect. So again, you're using between 1.5 cups to 1 3/4 cups of buttermilk. If you use too much, then it'll make it kind of hard to work the dough here in a second. All right, so then you're just gonna take that, you have your floured surface, you probably wanna flour your hands as well, and you're just gonna take that dough there, and you're just gonna put it down on your work surface here, flatten it out, incorporate a little bit of that flour that's there so it's not too sticky. So you have your ball of dough there. Again, you don't wanna overwork this, it's gonna make for tough biscuits. You're gonna take your rolling pin, you're just gonna roll it out a couple of times. You're gonna take it, you're gonna fold the dough over itself. Again, keep that rolling pin good and floured so it doesn't stick. You're gonna roll this again. Now I'm gonna fold it the other way. It's gonna fold it like that. All right, and I'm gonna fold it one more time. This just helps to build those flaky layers that we like in biscuits if you fold it over like that. All right, so we're gonna roll it out until it's about, depends on how thick you like your biscuits. I do my biscuits about 3/4 inch thick, sometimes 1 inch, depending on what I'm using them for. So you just wanna roll your dough out a little bit. And again, if your dough is sticking to your rolling pin, just add a little bit of flour. Okay, once you get that rolled out, we're gonna prep to cut the biscuits. All right, so at this point, you'll need to have some sort of biscuit cutter so that you can shape up your biscuits. What I tend to do, I use just a simple glass. This is how my mom taught me how to make biscuits. We never had like the fancy tools and things in the kitchen where, you know, we didn't have a biscuit cutter. So we would just use the glass. And depending on the size of your biscuits, like you could always use a smaller glass. I like to have really large biscuits because I tend to make like breakfast sandwiches and things with them. So this glass is probably larger than you might use for biscuits at home, but feel free to use them any size that you like. And you're just gonna flour that with a little bit of the flour that's there, and you're just gonna cut your biscuits. Now the trick to cutting your biscuits, you wanna make sure that, and it really just depends on what type of biscuits you like. So if you like biscuits that rise and that are kind of flaky, when you cut the dough, you wanna be sure that you just take your biscuit cutter and you go straight down and up and cut the biscuits that way. If you want a biscuit that's not so fluffy, that's not gonna rise too much, when you're cutting your biscuits, you'll twist and turn your biscuit cutter because that kind of just seals the edges of your biscuit so it doesn't let air in, and so you'll find that you'll have a flatter biscuit and it won't rise as high. So it really just depends on your preference, what type of biscuits you like. So I'm just gonna take this, I want these to be flaky and I want them to rise some, so I'm just gonna take this, I'm gonna cut, I'm going straight down. All right. Make sure you keep it floured as you do that. Try to get your circles as close together as you can. And this recipe here usually gives me about a good 7 to 8 biscuits. You can always double this recipe if you choose. All right, so then as you see here, I have my biscuit, and I'm just gonna take this and I'm gonna put it on a buttered cookie sheet. And when you put it on the buttered cookie sheet, you wanna be sure that, especially if you want those biscuits with layers and you want them to rise, that your biscuits are touching. So I'm just gonna take the biscuits that I've cut out, as you see here, and when I lay them on the cookie sheet, I'm just gonna make sure that they're touching, just like that, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and get the rest of my biscuits cut and put on this cookie sheet. All right, so the 4 biscuits that I already cut, they're already there. So you would just take your dough and kind of do the same process again. I wouldn't worry about refolding the dough, but just make sure you put all that back together, roll it back out until you get, like I said, about 3/4 inch to about 1 inch thick, and then you're just gonna cut again. And again, depending on what type of biscuit you want, will determine how you cut your biscuits. See, I got 2 more out of that. And again, I'm just going to take these and I'm going to put these so that they're touching on the tray. And I might have a little bit of extra here to make 1 or 2 more. I told you my recipe usually makes about 7 or 8 biscuits. It really just depends. So I'm just going to take this last batch of dough here and make a couple more biscuits. All right, so there you have it. I was able to get 8 biscuits out with the ingredients that I use. And again, you could double the recipe if you're making for a large family, or if you want to make enough biscuits to use for another day, you can absolutely double the recipe. But I have 8 biscuits here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take about 2 tablespoons of butter. The butter can be salted or unsalted. Again, I typically use unsalted butter. So I'm going to melt about 2 tablespoons of unsalted butter, and I'm going to add just a pinch of salt to that, and then I'm going to butter the tops of these biscuits. All right, so I have my butter here with a little bit of salt, just like a dash of salt, and I'm just going to butter these biscuit tops there and get this in the oven. So I preheated my oven before I started my recipe at 375. These will take about 20 to 25 minutes depending on your oven to bake. You'll know that they're ready when they're nice and brown on top. So about 20-25 minutes in the oven. And while these are baking in the oven, I will clean up all of this mess on this counter and I will get started with our sausage gravy. All right, so I have the biscuits in the oven. They have about 10 more minutes to go, and it'll take just about 10 minutes to make this quick and easy sausage gravy. All you need for this is a quick 4 ingredient recipe. You'll just need a roll of your favorite type of breakfast sausage. I would recommend just doing a standard mild sausage unless you like it spicy. You could do a spicy one, but try to stay away from like the maple flavored or the sage flavored. Just a standard mild sausage. You'll need between 3 to 4.5 cups of milk, just depending on how you like your gravy. If you want it thicker, you use a little bit less milk, but if you want it to be kind of runny, then you would use a little bit more milk. So it's really just based on your preference, but you're going to need at least 3 cups of milk. And then you're going to need about 1.5 teaspoons of black pepper. The nice thing about this gravy recipe is that it has a lot of black pepper flavor. So you definitely want to add black pepper there. And then just about a pinch of salt. You don't need too much salt because the sausage is salty. You have a little bit of salt on your biscuits as well. So you don't need too much salt. And then you'll need about 1/3 cup of flour, and this helps to build your gravy. So we're going to go ahead and get this in the cast iron and get this gravy rolling. All right, so we have our cast iron nice and hot. You're going to take that roll of sausage and you're just going to get that in there. And we're going to break this up and let this cook down. All right, so just like I said, any type of sausage that you like, just 1 roll of that. And again, this is a very easy sausage gravy recipe. Very, very easy, very basic. You could always add additional herbs or flavors if you like, but this is just your very basic sausage gravy. It's very delicious. It's one of my family favorites. My husband likes this. And, you know, it's perfect on like a nice and cool Saturday or Sunday morning where you just want to like rest in. It's definitely going to fill your belly. So I wouldn't recommend eating this before you have to go to work. Definitely a comfort food, one of our favorites. So you're going to cook down this sausage, get this nice and crumbled, and we want to be sure that after this is cooked that we drain it and drain it on some paper towels. All right, so our breakfast sausage is cooking down. I have that broken up pretty good. You're just going to let this cook until it's brown. Keep in mind that it will still simmer a little bit once you put the milk in there, so you don't have to cook it until it's fully brown. You just want to make sure that there's no pink. So we're going to just continue to cook this. It'll take between about 5 minutes or so. It doesn't take long to brown sausage. So about 5 minutes for this. And just, again, be sure that you drain it on a paper towel or use a colander just to get that excess grease from out of the pan. All right, so I've taken my sausage out. I drained it on a paper towel, and I usually just take like a paper towel to the top of it and just kind of pat it just to get a little bit of that excess oil, grease, or whatever you want to call it. We're just going to pour that back into the pan. And you need to keep a little bit of that grease to help build your gravy. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to take that 1/3 cup of flour. You're going to add that in there. You're going to get that mixed in good with the sausage. All right. Again, this is a pretty easy recipe. All right. Make sure you get all that flour mixed in there. At this time, you can also add in your black pepper. And if you prefer to wait until the end, that way you can taste it and adjust as needed, you can definitely feel free to do that. But I'm gonna go ahead and add my black pepper in now because I kind of know how much my family likes. And again, in that black pepper, I had just a pinch of salt. You don't need too much salt in this because you have lots of salt there in the sausage. We're gonna just mix that in. All right. Now, you're going to take that milk that you had, and I would not pour all the milk in at once. I would pour it in a little bit at a time, keep it stirring, and then just adjust as you see, you know, once it gets to the consistency that you like. So I'm pouring in about 1.5 cups right now. And this will cook down, so it seems like it's a lot of milk right now, but that flour will make it thicken up, and you'll have your gravy. So we're just going to cook this down some more. All right, so again, that was about 1.5 cups. I already know that I'm going to add in a little bit more. And you want to make sure that you scrape the sides of the pan. If you're using a cast iron, be sure you're using like a wooden spoon or like a spatula that's not metal, so you don't tear up that coating of your cast iron pan. So see how that thickened up already? So I know that I don't like my gravy that thick, so I'm going to add a little bit more milk. I'm going to go ahead and add about another cup. And again, the consistency just depends on what you prefer, what you like. All right. Also, if you like to have your gravy a little spicy, now would be the time to maybe add in a little bit of red pepper flakes. You could definitely do that. You can even add in more black pepper if you like. All right. So I'm just going to let this cook down. I'm going to let this cook, simmer for about, I'm going to bring it to a boil first. And then I'm going to let it simmer for 5 to 10 minutes, and it should be good to go. All right, as you see, that's coming to a boil. So I'm going to let that get to a heavier boil, and then I'm going to turn it down and let it simmer for just a little bit. I've already tried it, and I think my seasonings are just right. And again, you can add in other seasonings if you want. If you want to add a little bit of garlic, you can do that. This is quite peppery, so I wouldn't add any more pepper unless you like it that way. And again, you can add in red pepper flakes. I also forgot to mention that the milk can be whatever type of milk you prefer. Of course, I wouldn't use like an almond milk or soy milk or anything like that, but or at least I haven't tried it that way. So you might want to try it and let me know how that turns out. But you can use a whole milk, 1%, 2%, whatever you care to use. All right, so our gravy is pretty much finished. There you go. You have your easy sausage gravy. All right, I'm gonna let that simmer for a little bit, and our biscuits should be going off here any minute. All right, so there you have it. You have fresh made buttermilk biscuits, fresh out the oven. Mine took today about 26 minutes, so they're nice and golden brown, ready to go. And then we have the sausage gravy here. The sausage gravy was cooked in under 10 minutes, so very quick and easy to make. The thing with the biscuits, sometimes it takes a couple tries. I know it took me, I've been making biscuits since I was a kid, and it just, the first few times, it could be a sticky mess, but the more you practice, the easier it'll become. I know my biscuits are a family favorite. In fact, if you follow me on social media, you probably saw a couple weeks ago, my sister, I made some biscuits and I posted them, and she was like, "Are those homemade?" And I'm like, "Yep." And she's like, "I'm on my way." So they're definitely pretty popular. My nieces that live in Florida, when they come visit, they want to have biscuits. So I always make sure that I have this ready to go for my family. And then just to build your sausage biscuit and gravy, your biscuits and gravy, you're just gonna take a biscuit. You can decide if you want to, you can open it up and put gravy in the inside or what have you. I just tend to keep them the way they are, and I'm just gonna put a little bit of gravy on there. If your gravy thickens up on you, you can always add in a little bit of water, or you can add in a little bit of milk to thin it out a little bit. But I'm just gonna take the gravy, pour that on top of the biscuit, and there you have biscuits and gravy. All right, so again, there you have it. You have biscuits and gravy, and I thought I was gonna have the first taste today, but my husband has come out of his office. He smelled them cooking, and he wants to give it a try. So, babe, go ahead and try that for me. Let me know how it is.
Yeah.
It's nice and hot.
Okay.
And again, you definitely want to serve this while it's nice and hot and fresh.
It's me again.
Can't see you in the camera. You gotta duck down a little bit.
Oh my goodness, this is just great. I've never had anything like this. My God, is my wife a professional chef or what?
I'm a professional chef.
And I didn't pay him to say that. So again, thanks for trying that, babe. Joe, I'll have some for you in a minute. I'll give you some in a minute. All right, so again, I'm gonna give it a taste because of course my husband would say that. But it usually comes, it's a, tried recipe. Cook it all the time. Family loves it. Quick and easy to make. If you have any feedback, suggestions, or how do you make your biscuits and gravy, feel free to leave comments. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my page, MH Family Adventures. We'll have more recipes and more fun to come here soon. Thanks for stopping by today. Till next time.